What is the link between attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, aka ADHD, and eating disorders? My name is Sheena, and I am a registered dietitian specializing in the care of persons with eating disorders. And this channel explores all of the psychological and physiological variables that are associated with eating disorders and in eating disorder recovery. So, if you're looking to enhance your knowledge in those areas, definitely click that subscribe button. So, some commonalities between both ADHD and eating disorders is that both typically involve high anxiety, being easily distracted or fidgety, getting overwhelmed easily, constant fatigue, feeling overly sensitive, feeling rejected by our peers. While these character traits don't necessarily mean that the person with while these character traits don't necessarily mean that a person with ADHD will always develop an eating disorder, they do put that individual at a greater risk for developing an eating disorder, especially if some of these character traits are not managed either through medication, psychological intervention, or hopefully both. And on the topic of medication, while these medications are critical for reducing some of the symptoms of ADHD, and especially those symptoms that put the individual at risk for an eating disorder. On the flip side, these medications also unfortunately have the side effect of reducing appetite. So, this is something that individuals really need to be mindful of if they are experiencing ADHD, to make sure that those medications are not interfering with their daily meals and snacks. Some of the reasons why an individual with ADHD might be more susceptible to developing an eating disorder is that they have character traits like impulsivity. They might eat too quickly or too much or not at all without too much reflection on that experience altogether. Eating too quickly can very quickly lead to eating too much, as our brain does not have time to process what the stomach is telling us. One other reason that an individual with ADHD might be more susceptible to developing an eating disorder is inattention. So it's going to be difficult for that individual to focus on things, especially things like planning out meals, when meals should be, and what the meal composition should be. An individual with ADHD also suffers from hyperactivity. So it's probably going to be difficult for that individual to even sit long enough to eat a meal, much less plan and prepare out meals. An individual with ADHD might also have difficulty with impulse control, which could potentially lead to restricting or ultimately binging, especially if restricting food is very prevalent. An individual with ADHD also often has very heightened, intense emotions. So these hyper emotional states might drive that individual to want to restrict food or overindulge in food or even potentially binge eat. So, the first thing that you want to do if you are a person that has ADHD or you're supporting someone with ADHD and that person has an eating disorder is you want to get a good care team in place. So, that care team should include an eating disorder dietitian, therapist, and medical doctor that can help manage some of the physical, emotional, and dietary needs of that individual. Tips and tricks that are especially useful for individuals with ADHD in recovery from an eating disorder is to make those meals and snacks as simple as possible. So, one thing I like to say is make it as simple or more simple than a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to start. So, we still want to get all of the meal compositions in there. So, we want to make sure that we have some carbohydrates, some proteins, some fruits and or veggies, some dairy in that meal. But we can do that in a really simple fashion. Allows them to get in food more frequently throughout the day, so that way that individual is now able to have regular hunger and fullness cues, which may have been skews of food restriction slash binging that cycle in and out. I also recommend individuals with ADHD use a timer to remind them when meals and snacks should take place. Remove distractions at the table. Try taking each meal and snack to the table rather than sitting in front of the television or on our cell phones while we're eating. This can make it easier to recognize those body cues. If you find yourself eating food very quickly or very slowly, timer at the meal for 30 minutes So that way we know we have to extend out our meal at least that duration. It can help us to really be more mindful at that meal.